Hi, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Hitstreak. Check it out. I got to give a big shout out to my show sponsor, my friends over at AVLX. I also have to give a big shout out to Charles Henry and Ace Young, the amazing performers and producers of the music behind the show, as well as the amazing people that make up the Hit Lab creative team, who are the producers of the show. Folks, I have a favor to ask. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, click that subscribe button to make sure you get alerted when new episodes are dropped. Thanks for tuning in.
The real success stories told by the people who live them.
We're going to have some guests on this show that everybody knows, and we're going to have guests on this show that nobody knows yet.
One by one, Nick Hyder is adding hits to the hit streak.
Blessings, folks. Welcome back to another episode of The Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and I've got an extra special treat for you in the Hit Lab with me today. I've got the co-founder of the Bledsoe Agency, which is an elite baseball management firm right here in Brentwood, Tennessee. I've got Hunter Bledsoe in the building today. Hunter, thanks so much for hanging with me this afternoon.
Well, I can already tell, Nick, and thanks for having me, that you have a way better on-air voice than I do. So you'll do most of the talking and I'll do most of the listening. This is how it's going to
go? Hey, man, it's your show. It can go however you want, right?
Okay, great.
So, all right. So I mentioned before, you're the co-founder of the Bledsoe Agency, a baseball management firm, an elite baseball management firm right here in Brentwood, Tennessee. But most people, especially if they're from the city of Nashville, would know you from an incredible collegiate career that you had, that you capped off right here at Vanderbilt University.
And maybe lesser known is that the people that followed that might not have known that I didn't start at Vanderbilt. That's where I finished.
That's right.
And the journey to get there was a very interesting story. I think it's worth kind of sharing or mentioning. So I originally started out at Duke University. I was valedictorian in my high school class. My mom was an educator. I love sports, but I was only going to play where education was first. Mm-hmm. And so when I started to narrow down schools, there weren't any that fit that criteria that were willing to give me a scholarship. And so I ended up walking on at Duke University. I had gotten in there to school and so made my way there, played there as a freshman. I always thought I was the best player, right? Even though I might not have been. We all have that mindset as athletes. And I got there and I didn't play right away. I was on the bench. And, at first, maybe like most people in that situation, I felt a little sorry for myself or whatever. And I remember having a conversation with my dad who had worked with me since I was a little kid. He and I had always gone to the cages. We had always gone to the field. It's not like today where maybe we have private instructors and, back then it was your dad and a VCR maybe if you had one, or it was, trying to talk to the person to figure out the swing. I remember Walt Reniak and George Brett is how I learned to swing.
Did they ever do the dry erase marker on the television screen? Did they ever do that?
100% no.
So I know my dad did. He had the dry erase marker on the old tube TV screen.
But I called him up and my dad had played football at Tennessee. My dad was an old school type of guy, and he said, "Are you serious? You're going to feel sorry for yourself when you're blessed enough to be getting an education and playing baseball?" He said, "If you don't like where you are, work harder." And so, I decided I was going to go to the weight room. That was the first time I'd ever learned to get into a weight room. I just kept working, ended up getting on the field to start my college career when we went to Clemson for the first time. And I'll never forget, my first collegiate start was against Chris Benson, who was the number 1 overall pick.
Holy cow.
And Matt LaCroix was catching, who ended up in the big leagues as well.
Yep.
And the first pitch he threw to me, I hit straight sideways. And I remember looking back at Matt LaCroix and said, "Hey, man, stop holding my bat." And I knew it was a whole different world. But, I ended up working hard, but things didn't work out there. I ended up getting cut from the team as a sophomore. Another one of those moments where you're like, wow, man, is God telling me, like, this isn't the path? Like, what's going on? I remember crying. I remember going back to my dorm room, just sitting in there going, how in the world do I call my dad and tell him this? Finally, after about 3 days, I did. Ended up a guy at Walter State, Roger Jackson, who was the coach at the time, had played professional softball with my dad. Called him up. He said, hey, I don't have an infield spot for you. I know you can hit. You have an outfield glove. And I said, well, I'll show up a week early, and you can hit me as many balls as you want. I just need a chance. I ended up at the end of that year being an all-conference player, hitting 400, still nothing. I just kept thinking, like, baseball just must not be for me.
Right.
All these obstacles and roadblocks and all these things that were put in your path. And so I went home. My brother was a senior in high school. I wanted to watch him play. I'd never gotten to see him play in high school, so I was watching him play. I was working with him a little bit. And out of the blue, I get a call that Vanderbilt was going to be at one of the workouts at Walter State, and would I come work out, just be around the guys. And so I drove up. I remember calling the high school coach at the time, was one of my childhood friends who was older than me but had played at Western Kentucky. And I said, hey, man, Scoot, you got to take me out to the field. We got hit and take ground balls. And I remember being out there for a couple of hours and driving back to Walter State. As I drive in that day, I knew, like, it was what I was meant to do. It wasn't the path that was the easiest road. It wasn't exactly how I thought it was supposed to be. But I remember walking out of the car and walking on that field and feeling like I was carried by something. I was going to do something different than I had ever done, like in a uniform. I ran, in fact, I was never a blazer, but I ended up running a 6.7 60 that day. I'd never broken a 7-flat 60 in any 60 I'd ever run.
Dude, that's motoring.
I ended up, I got 25 swings. I hit 20 of them off the wall or out of the park. And
wow.
The guy from Vanderbilt at the time, John Barlow was his name, he was on his way to Georgia to scout another player. He turned his car around. He drove it back to Vanderbilt, and he said, we got to get this guy. So they brought me in on a visit the next week. I remember it's the first time I ever learned about negotiation. Speaking about owning an agency now, I'll tell you, this was the first time I had ever learned to negotiate. Vanderbilt offered me a spot to play, but they said, we don't have any money. And I said, well, Mississippi State's offered me 25%, but Vanderbilt's a better school, and it's where I'd rather go, but you need to match it so I feel like there's skin in the game. Mississippi State had never called me.
Oh.
Vanderbilt offered me 25%, and I signed the next day.
Boom.
And that was the start of that. But then I get to Vanderbilt. I ended up starting there my first year. I get to the end of the season, and we're going to Georgia because we were qualified for the SEC tournament.
Yep.
And we're at Georgia, so you go in Thursday night, you work out. Actually, I guess at that time we were going to play Thursday night, so it would have been a Wednesday because it was the last SEC weekend before you go to Hoover. And I remember the next morning, the first day of the game, getting a call from the coaches to say, hey, we need you to come by our suite. We need to visit with you. And I remember talking to my roommate on the road and saying, they're going to up my scholarship. I had led the team in hitting that year, and we had a good season. I hit third in the lineup, and I remember saying they're going to increase my scholarship. And I remember walking into that suite, and the look on the coaches' faces, I thought somebody in my family had died.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, no. Like, what's happened? And they said, Hunter, we need you to sit down, and we need to walk you through a scenario, and you're probably not going to understand it, but there's some things that have happened with your transcript and when you transferred that have come to light when we sent your paperwork off to the NCAA. You're ineligible to play.
Oh, my. And
I'm like, what do you mean I'm ineligible to play? I have over a 3.5 GPA. I feel like I've done everything. It's like they said, no, when you transferred from Duke to Walter State to Vanderbilt, there's a 4.24 rule. And within that, what that means is you have to graduate from the junior college that you attended, and you have to take 24 hours from that university. And that rule was put into place for some of the basketball programs back in the day that were, some kids were ineligible in the fall, or the following spring, they'd send them to the junior college for the fall, and then they would come back in January and they'd be eligible for March Madness.
Right.
And so what ended up happening is I took 20 hours from the junior college. That's what I was told is all I had to do was graduate from the junior college. I had a 4.0. And because my grades were good and because I had come from another prestigious university, they just overlooked the fact that I was 4 hours short.
Wow.
I could have taken a summer class or whatever it was, but it just got overlooked. Yeah. And so I ended up playing the entire year inelibly. We had to forfeit every game I played in.
Oh, my gosh.
Not only did that happen, but I was also deemed ineligible for the entire next year. And there were multiple cases that had gone on that showed less games and less things. And I actually took the NCAA to court to try to get an injunction to play.
Didn't know that.
And the judge, when she read her ruling, tears were coming down her face as she told me that I couldn't play. Because she said, because you don't have to actually, you actually decide you want to be a part of the NCAA, you don't have to be, then whatever they say and govern is what it is. And so I ended up having to sit out. So once again, I'm back to square one of, man, is this baseball thing what I'm supposed to be doing?
So hold on a minute. So went to high school, standout player, valedictorian of your school. So nobody better at grades than you. And then you go to JUCO. No, sorry, you went to Duke, a prestigious university where you made good grades again, right? Then had a 4.0 in JUCO and are deemed ineligible due to academics.
Correct.
Folks, like whatever your problems are, they're everywhere for everybody, right? All right, go on. That's incredible. I didn't know this.
So then in my mind, I'm like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Right? Because it's been I haven't had a hard life.
Right.
As, but like you said, to me at the time, it was hard.
The heaviest problem you have is the heaviest problem you've had, right? Regardless of if it's heavy to somebody else.
That's right. So for me, I love baseball. It's all I wanted to do. It's all I ever wanted to do. So, and I'm giving everything I have to it. And it's like this roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, obstacle.
Yeah.
There's a great book, by the way, Obstacle is the Way, that speaks to kind of this, that people avoid obstacles, but the obstacle is actually the way. It's what builds us. It's what turns us into who we are and what we are. Mm-hmm. So I've always tried. My grandmother was she would always speak this truth into me when I was a kid, that at the end of the day, Hunter, good things will happen to good people, but if you decide to take pity on yourself and you decide to turn your problems into bigger problems, you're not going to ever see the other side of that problem. And so I looked at this as another opportunity. I said, okay, if they're going to deem me ineligible, they're going to deem me, I have to sit out a year, then I'm going to take that year to become the very best baseball player that I could have ever been. And so I took my nutrition more seriously. I took my training more seriously. I put in more hours than I ever had. And I decided in my mind, when I got a chance to get back on that field, I would never, ever take that for granted again. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because out of that became a better player. In the next year, I ended up being an All-American and the SEC Player of the Year and an NCAA a Top VIII award winner and all these things that, I thought, well, man, why me? We all have these thoughts in our head that creep up, but I realized that my journey was meant for something different than what I thought it was, and the timetable of that journey was just going to be different than I thought it was. And that allowed me to play professional baseball. And I think if that never happened, I may not have.
Right.
Because it's a strong man's game, and I got stronger than everybody else.
So I want to make sure everybody understands how elite of a player you were at an SEC school, which is arguably the top of the game in college, right? So you're playing against the best in the country, right? And that year, so what is an NCAA Top VIII award? What is that?
So the NCAA every year, it's the Heisman Trophy of college athletics.
There you go.
There are 8 people in all of college athletics that are given that award, and that means all men, all women, all sports, all divisions.
Yep.
So every NCAA athlete that exists in that given year, they give it to 8. And I was fortunate enough to be the first baseball player to win that award in 20 years and the first in Vanderbilt history to win that award.
It's incredible. You also, that year, that it's a record that still stands today, right, for batting average in a single season?
I still hold that at Vanderbilt, yes.
At 459, and then career at 425, that's insane, brother. That's insane. You know what I mean? How many guys will hit that this year in all of college sports?
Very few.
Very few. And nothing against so John Barlow was my manager in the professional levels in Edmonton. He's an amazing man.
Great person.
A great baseball
I know him
guy.
a lot for
Yes.
the opportunity that he gave me.
Me too, right? And one of the I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of him, but boy, what a gentle giant, I guess you could say.
Well, I can say what happens when you get on the wrong side of him. I decided to miss a workout, 6 a.m. workout, and that was the least fun day of my entire life, probably.
Well, he was a madman. I can remember, of course, as a professional player, when we weren't playing, we were doing all the things we shouldn't have been. And I remember we looked out at the hotel, and it was like early in the morning. We hadn't gone to bed, and Coach Barlow's already up. He's running outside on the sidewalks of the road and wherever we were at on the road. But he was out getting the work in. He was the first man up every time.
That's what I think I respected about him the most, is that he just did the work. And I've always appreciated people that, in whatever walk it is, they're just willing to pay the price. You and I, we've talked about this before, and the idea of life is fair. Everybody's price is just different.
So let's stay there for a minute, because I got to give you one of those. So I heard that from you when we told our baseball team. We coached together on our sons. Last year was an amazing year. It was probably the most fun I've ever had coaching, because I got to hang out with you, right? So the kids are great.
And vice
parents are
versa.
great. Well, man, it was awesome. And honestly, what the kids got before and after every game, the mindset, the due diligence that goes into every single detail of why we're doing it, so they understand. I learned so much. And you said a quote last year that really stuck with me, and I brought it to the team, and it was that life is fair, everybody's price is just different. Now, obviously we record everything, and it went out on all of social, and it went bonkers. All right, so guys, all these folks that have been, cheering from the sidelines about how great it is, and of course, you ain't doing a good job if you don't have haters, right? So a lot of the haters on that, I've got the guy that pioneered that right here, and we're going to talk about it. So we're going to clear up the air right now, right? So what does that mean? Life is fair, everybody's price is just different.
So most of the time, we are born with something. We're all given different gifts. And we didn't earn those. We were given them. Now, the greatest honor of a gift given is how you uphold that gift. And do you bring it out into the light in its fullest potential? But a lot of times it's really easy to say, man, I was born with less, or I didn't have as much, and I can create this woe me mentality versus learning that you have a unique gift. You are special. Like, we all have it, and then going and getting it, going and living it in its full potential. And if you want something, not taking the mindset of, I don't have enough. It's never about the resources, only the resourcefulness.
Ooh.
And can you just maximize who you are, and can you put your mindset onto something and be willing to do whatever it takes to get it? Nick Saban obviously is one of the greatest coaches of life in general, but obviously one of the greatest football coaches of all time.
Right.
And there's a famous kind of quote that he gets is, everybody thinks that it takes this or it takes that, or you have to do this or you have to do that, but it just takes what it takes.
Ooh, it takes what it takes.
And so at the end of the day, that's my whole thing with life is fair, everybody's price is just different. If you weren't born fast, but you want to be a sprinter, it means you've got to do more work than the person who was born faster.
There you go.
If you want to be a doctor and you weren't born with the greatest IQ that ever was, you just have to study harder. And so if you want something, it is attainable. Your price just may be different than somebody else's. And if you look from the outset of that of, well, I can't do this because I'm not born with that, or I'm not going to get this because that has, then you're right.
Oh.
But if you look at it and you say, I'm going to go get it and I'll do what is required because it takes what it takes, then life is fair because you're going to get it.
Robert Kiyosaki is famously quoted for, he replaced the word, he deals with money a lot, and and he's, instead of saying, I can't afford that, replace the can't with how can I, right? And then all of a sudden you start thinking of ways to get it, and that's usually, like, true or false. Most people's, all the limits people have are self-inflicted.
Yeah, so what is your ceiling, right? What is your potential? It's your beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so hold on a minute.
Right? So if you self-impose a certain limitation to yourself, you've just created your ceiling. That's why when you believe through faith that anything is possible, you're absolutely right, it is.
That's right. What is it? Yeah, what does faith even mean, right? When you just get to the root of the word, right? So, man, we're going to talk a lot about mindset, because what people they should know about you and they don't, is I think that you're one of the most top-notch speakers on planet Earth today, right?
Thank you for saying that.
It's a shame, and you will one day. You should be speaking in front of 50,000 people on a regular basis.
Well, then I might not be quite as amusing as I am when we talk one-on-one.
Well, it's again, the good thing is about this platform is that it's so many people are going to get to experience the gifts that I get to hang out just by being able to call you a friend, right? So that's really cool. But let's, because we're going to touch on a lot of the mindset. So let's touch a little bit about your agency here, right? So you talked a lot about the journey to become. To have arguably one of the greatest seasons in the history of college baseball, right? So let's tell people, follow up with your professional career real quick. So you finished up at Vanderbilt.
So I ended up signing with the Los Angeles Dodgers. I played with the Dodgers for 4 seasons.
Yep. Then
was released and then played with the Kansas City Royals and the New York Yankees for parts of a season.
Yep.
So all in the minor leagues.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't say in the midst of that last season at Vanderbilt, and I felt like that's why for me I think the journey of baseball is such a great sport to mimic life, and that's why we try to teach our kids through baseball, right? Mm-hmm. It's our vehicle to teach them about life. But what people don't know, I led the SEC in stolen bases that last year.
Okay.
With a torn hamstring.
Wow.
So 1 week before the season started, it was cold, as it's going to be this week in Nashville. You never know with the weather, right? But it was 1 week before the season started, and we had a guy getting ready for Major League Spring Training.
Mm-hmm.
So he was throwing in an inter squad against us. And I was always the guy, and probably like why at times I probably rub people the wrong way as a competitor. If you were supposed to be a somebody, I wanted to line up against you.
There you go.
Because I wanted to show you that I could do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was pitching against us. He's in Major League camp. So in my mind, I was like, well, I'm going to show him I'm a Major League player also, right? So he pitches against me. I hit a single off of him. I steal second base, and as I'm stealing second base, it's freezing cold. I tear my hamstring.
Oh, man.
It's a week before the season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had worked so hard, right? I had to sit out the whole last year.
Yep.
And I had worked so hard to get to that point. I was like, there's no way I'm not playing.
Right.
And there's no way anybody's going to know this happened, because if they do, then maybe I don't get the next chance to play professionally.
That's right.
And so I spent, an hour every day. Like, Justin was our trainer. He was awesome. I went an hour and did therapy and did stuff. And basically we just put Band-Aid after Band-Aid on it, and I could play that day and when we go to work the next day. Mm-hmm. But ended up leading the league in stolen bases. Well, that turned into that torn hamstring when I got to be a professional, turned into a back injury. Yeah. And so I was never quite the same player as a professional as I was at the end of my college career. Even though I hit 300 in the minor leagues, I made a few all-star teams. I was in pain most every day I was playing. In fact, by my third season, it took me 30 minutes to get out of bed every day.
Gotcha.
I would roll over to my knees. I would prop myself up. I would go patch myself up, and I would play because at that level, too, I was not that heralded of a player. I knew if I missed weeks at a time, I might be released, right? So I just was going to do whatever it took to play, but it wore on me after a while.
Sure.
I knew I was a good player. I'd never really lined up. I'd never put on a uniform to say I was a major league player. That's never why I did it.
Right.
I lined up and played because I love to compete. And I wanted to just compete against the best people, right? And just go out there and just see what I was made of every day when I could do that. And so I got what I needed out of professional baseball. And when it started being a chore to just get up every day, it became work in my mind. I was like, okay, I don't need this anymore. Like, it wasn't fulfilling anymore because I couldn't go with all my bullets in my gun.
Right.
I wasn't the same player anymore. It was time to move on to something else. And so I was finishing up in 2003 was my last year playing.
Yep.
I had been signed by the Yankees as a player coach. I sat beside Robinson Cano every day. That was my job.
That's awesome.
Was to help mentor him. And I tell people still to this day, whether he's done like the best or the worst, he played the game easier than anybody I'd ever seen play. And I remember he was so good. And that's when you knew, like, in my mind, I knew it was time because I couldn't make my body do those things anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember getting called in. Billy Massey was our manager, and I remember getting called into his office one day, and he said, "Hunter, do you think Robinson likes to play?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, there are people in our organization that just feel like, the lackadaisicalness that maybe he just doesn't." I said, "No, man." I said, "They need to put him in the big leagues. He's just bored."
Oh, yeah.
He's so much better than everybody here in his mind and how he plays that the game's just too easy here. He needs to get promoted, and he needs to go up. But I had been signed, so I had started talking during that year with my brother. My brother was in law school at the time.
And he's your younger brother.
He's my younger brother. Yep. He's 2 years younger than I am. And I was talking to my brother at the time, and we were just trying to figure out what we were going to do, right? He was finishing up law school. I was finishing up my playing career. I knew I was done that last year, even though I was still playing. I just had lost, because I had never thought in my mind the big leagues is what I was after. It was just, could I compete at the highest level that I possibly could? Mm-hmm. I knew I wasn't competing at the highest level I possibly could anymore.
That's totally fair.
So I was on in my life to what I was going to do next. And so he had been clerking for an entertainment firm. They dabbled in sports and entertainment. They worked with Edwin McCain in the music business. And they helped a few football players. And he said, "I kind of like this industry. What do you think about it?" And I was like, actually, I didn't have a wonderful representation experience. I think a lot of players didn't. We always thought like maybe there was more to it than there was. And I was like, I think I would love to do that. And he was like, "Well, how do we do that?" We started talking about those things. Like, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are lots of really good agencies. How do we break in? How do we actually create a business? Mm-hmm. And we sat down and we were raised, by two great parents that had always told us to reach as high as we could and to dream as big as we could and to challenge and tackle whatever came in front of us. And so we probably were a little too naive with a little too big of an ego to think we could fail. Right.
It's a great recipe, though.
And so we took $1,000 in a dream and we started our business. But I remember he and I having conversations that, what if we fail? Right? Mm-hmm. We didn't believe we were going to fail. But the realist in you, like, you're not being authentic if you don't ask that question. Mm-hmm. And so we just ask it of each other. Like, if we wake up in 3 years and we're bankrupt, are you okay?
Yeah.
And we were both like, we're fine. We'll be fine. Like, if that's where we are in 3 years, we'll figure it out.
Yes.
We had enough skills and we had enough, talents that we felt like if that's what happened, that somebody would be more than willing to hire us through those failures because they knew on the other side of it would be something great.
Right.
And
Will Smith says that God puts the greatest things in life on the other side of fear, directly on the other side of fear.
And he's 100% right. And so we just got to that place where we were like, we're going to do this.
That's awesome.
And now we're in the 18th year of doing it. And so
18 years. If you just keep the doors open for a decade, you did something good in business these days, right? So 18, and you're having your biggest year. Every year is bigger than the previous one. You're still growing.
It's been really cool to watch. We've worked with 9 first-round picks in the last 6 years. We've had the fortune to work with the number 1 overall pick. We've had the fortune to work with MVPs and All-stars in the big leagues. But the greatest joy of all of it is that we actually get to have a hand in helping them to that point. See, our business was set up, the agency business, as the bulk of people know it, was the business of baseball. And the business of baseball being contracts,
right,
or marketing and branding.
Yeah.
They're 100% a part of this business, and they're 100% a huge part of this business.
Absolutely.
But where we took a little different angle, and it's kind of where our niche became within the business, is we didn't feel like in the beginning we could compete with going and outselling contracts. We hadn't done them, right?
It's fair. That's totally fair.
We didn't have that angle, right? Because we were brand new.
Right.
But what we did have is a lot of hustle and a lot of knowledge about the game. And so our angle was, and we just started thinking about it practically. Why are players paid? Why are players interesting? Why do they get contracts off the field? Why do businesses want to associate with them? And because they're the best versions of themselves. They became the very best players and people in the game. And so we thought, well, do we have to follow the traditionalist in this business? Do we have to do this like everybody else did it? Or can we say, why don't we talk to people about investing in them? How do we help you become the best version of you, and through that, the business will thrive?
So income is the outcome, not the objective.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic.
And so I just started thinking about my career, the players that I've been around, what limited the ones that didn't get there and what allowed for the ones that did. And through that, started to create a framework and a blueprint for what it looks like to maximize yourself as a baseball player.
So you guys basically just from jump identified what the key performance indicators are in the baseball business, and you focused on those.
And we started to look at it and say, for instance, if you played X position, what are the skills necessary to thrive at that position?
That's awesome.
And where can you get the biggest return on your investment of time to maximize you?
So we have a lot of aspiring and even seasoned entrepreneurs and business owners that hang with us on a weekly basis. What you just said is so important in just business, right? So let's make sure they understand, they get that again, because that's probably one of the most valuable things where they're going to hear today, right? So you mentioned framework. You mentioned whatever it is that if you want to open up a hair salon, a pizza restaurant, or a gym, what do they got to do? What's the first thing that you would do if you were doing that? The first thing you did in your agency, first thing you're doing for your players?
Is just understand what it takes to be great in those particular things. So, for instance, like let's say it's a pizza, you open up a pizza joint. Well, what is interesting about the pizza joints that are good? Why did you go we've all had good pizza. We've all had pizza that wasn't so good. We've also eaten pizza that was just good bang for your buck.
Yes. Right.
So there's different avenues to arrive at the outcome of a profitable business within that, but you can't be in the middle of them. And so for us, that's how we looked at the baseball player. Is when I looked at so hitting is what I always had focused on, and then through the understanding of hitting led into the development of pitching, and I have some great friends in the business and ended up patenting the core velocity belt with Lance Wheeler, and just different things like that just have born out of this quest for knowledge. But so I have a good friend, have named Matt Cada. Matt was a college teammate of mine.
Okay.
He was also our first professional major league client.
Okay.
And Matt was very similar to me, both in how he thought, how he worked, and he was a guy who had to maximize himself to have a major league career.
Okay.
And so I was helping him in this process.
So his price was different.
His price was different. And he was willing to pay it. And if there was anybody that I respected, honestly, there was nobody I respected more. He and I at Vanderbilt were the first two guys there every day.
Yep.
And he was working on his defense, and I was working on my hitting.
Yep.
And it showed. I wasn't a very good defender and a great hitter, and he was a solid enough hitter, but more known for his versatility in his defense. So he was having to learn and nurture his hitting as a professional. And so we started talking, and he's a smart guy and a driven guy. And so we just started talking, and I was exploring and thinking about ways to help players. And I knew a lot about hitting. But I ended up my last year in professional baseball. I was fortunate enough, that was when the internet really first, when I was a professional, is when the internet first started becoming a thing.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I don't understand how to get the most out of myself. I'm going to search for somebody who might be able to help me. And I came across, and I was just doing searches on the internet, and I came across this company called Set Pro.
Okay.
And Set Pro was a baseball development company at the time. It was actually more about like the Russian literature of overload and overspeed training and implementation of bat speed and throwing and stuff like that.
Okay.
So Driveline before Driveline existed,
Right.
so to speak. The methodologies. Now Driveline is a wonderful company who's like flourished and done so many cool things.
Absolutely.
But the guy who started this company is the godfather, in my mind, of biomechanics in baseball, and it's a gentleman by the name of Paul Nyman.
Okay.
And Paul Nyman, I just said, I'm going to reach out. And I reached out to him, and I said, Paul, I have no money. I said, what you're doing, though, is so innovative and cool to me that I just want to learn, and I just wonder if you'd be willing and open to sharing ideas. I don't have the money to pay you, and I understand if you say no.
Right.
And he was willing to do it because he saw my desire.
That's awesome.
And Paul was brilliant. And he was an engineer, and I was an engineer by trade and schooling, and so we hit it off that way. And he started sharing these thoughts with me, and I started exploring them. And where I could start to translate them was from the baseball perspective, because he wasn't a baseball person. And see, right now in the game, that's what the game is sorely needing, because analytics has gotten so much a part of the game.
Yes.
And now it's this new school and old school butting heads versus who can blend and sit in the middle of those two things and translate.
Ooh.
Because that's what players need. But I go back to this with Paul. He started to share these things, and I was kind of the bridge. Like, he's sharing these ideas. I'm trying them out. I see the benefit, but I can't fully translate what it is and how to do it.
Right.
And so I experimented on Matt.
Okay.
Because Matt was open and willing. And then through that process, met Josh Donaldson, and we had a 10-year history of the same thing.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's really where it took off. Is I had these thoughts in my head, and over the years, I have it's never been different what my belief was in helping players and the mission of our company.
Right.
We just have more knowledge and resources today than we did 18 years ago.
That's right.
And
why would you not want to use them?
Exactly.
That's the hard-headedness of the old school. Change is inevitable, but growth is optional, right? And like, why not find a better way to do it?
And so now it's through analytics and technology and old school teaching. We've just created what I think is a pretty unique and cool company. The music business was doing it all along, right? If you were a good singer, they got you a vocal coach.
That's right.
But my industry, and I think it's transitioning a little bit, and hopefully we've had the entry into it, and people can look at it and say, man, they've been fairly successful doing that. Maybe we could try it too. Because I think it is the best way to represent players. Investing in them fully 360 degrees, right? Whatever they need that touches money, let's help them.
Absolutely.
And the biggest one, and where you get the biggest return on your investment time, is in you. You could take your money and put it in the stock market, but invest in yourself, and that return is going to be exponential.
Absolutely. So I've understanding how the business world works and agencies and everything, you guys have taken a very unique approach, which it is a better model. It's a better way, and it's just a matter of time before everybody is adopting that. But like, there's nobody better at understanding how to utilize relationships and how important relationships are. What makes your agency so cool with the limited time that I've gotten to hang around, but just you guys put out some great video stuff with inside looks on everything. To be with, I don't know, one of the bigger agencies that's been around forever. What does it mean to be a client? Because I know with yours, it means they're a part of, you guys have the Silverback Tribe, right? So we're going to learn about that. But they're a part of, they're training together, they're growing together, they're a part of, there's relationships and friendships that are developed that'll never go away.
So one of the things I thought when I was a professional player, as were you, your family couldn't help you in the game. Your family could support you. Your family could be there to love you. But unless you had a dad that was a professional baseball coach or a professional baseball player, it probably you had gone beyond them and what your knowledge of the game was. So being able to help you in that respect stopped.
Right.
But we know how important family is. And so what I wanted to do, and my brother and I are family, and I think that's what makes it unique, is we wanted to create a family within the game. We wanted our players to feel like they had and were a part of something bigger than themselves. They weren't on an island. They weren't out by themselves. Because anyone that's ever tried so unfortunately we're in a labor dispute right now. Right? And people are probably mad at baseball. But professional baseball to boot. But what people have to understand is, and you live this just as much as I did, we made $7,500 for the year the first year we played. Like
I would have killed for that.
You know
what I mean?
So we just like professional baseball players have this huge long window where most of them are making nothing, and they're out on an island. They're moving city to city. So we just felt like the community within the game was really important for players. And so we felt like if we could ever do it where we could create a place that was their home, that they felt like that was their home, no matter how long they came there, whether it be a week, a month, a day, they didn't come there for 3 years. They always knew they had a place to come back to that was their home with people that they knew, that it would be really important for them and their long-term growth as players. And that's what we've done. You know, if you come into our place, you know, there's a 10,000 square foot place where they train, and on any given day there's any number of players in there working out together and learning and growing from each other. Because I think the beauty of that place is the conversations in between.
Absolutely.
You know, just the one-off where they're just having a conversation just like you and I are doing right there. And, you know, I know you hit the hit streak. There's that little nugget that comes out that ingrains in their brain, and all of a sudden their path is directed differently. And so out of that, I was trying to think of a creative way to coin for them what their tribe was. And so we nicknamed it the Silverback Tribe because, you know, if you think about like the Silverback, it's strong, it's masculine, it's you know, alpha. And that was really kind of our environment, right? It's the best players in the world competing against the best players in the world every day.
That's right.
And they're just iron sharpens irons. They're just sharpening their swords every single day in there. They're competing every day. And we, over time, I wanted to create something where it was like you had to earn your way here. So, you know, yes, you know, just because I wanted them, that's what happens within the game. You were the best. Everybody was the best player.
That's right.
You know, that you're not special here. But you are special because you're a part of this.
That's right.
But you had to earn your way into it. So you don't actually become a part of the Silverback Tribe, even though you're a client, until you actually hit a ball 100 miles an hour in our facility. And then you earn the T-shirt.
That's right.
Well, that over time, because the culture just grew and grew and grew, that didn't become very difficult anymore after a while for guys to do. It's still a thing. right? You're still a part of the tribe once you do it, but we've escalated it now where you get a gold gorilla shirt when you hit 110.
All right.
And this year was the first year we started doing that, and we've had 4 players earn those shirts. Holy cow! And actually, the 5th the other day just earned his. So
that's awesome.
It's amazing to watch.
Absolutely.
When you set a standard or you set a goal and you have highly competitive people who care about each other, pushing each other, and that's the cool thing about the tribe. They compete hard. It matters a lot. So every week we have a gold chain with a gold diamond gorilla that they get to keep for the week when they win the week, and they're fighting like crazy to win that week. But they're not at the expense of the guy beside them. Mm-hmm. They're actually cheering for them, even though they know it might have them lose. And that's such a unique and cool thing, like, to watch, is especially in our culture today where everybody seems like it's about me.
Yes.
Instead of we.
Yes.
That you can create something where it's about we.
You've also, a lot of these guys might come from small towns like yourself where who else can they train with? You hear all the time, show me your 5 best friends and I'll show you your future, like you are who you hang around with. And you're literally like think about how far some of the guys might not go if they didn't get to work out with those guys on a daily basis.
I say this at least once a week because I want them to have huge belief, right? We talked about that earlier. Your belief is your ceiling. And I talk about this every day with them. I'm like, could you imagine if you were back at your high school and you were the only guy training? That's what you were doing versus what you do here. How can anybody keep up with you guys?
That's right.
Like, not only are you talented, you've also made a commitment to be somewhere that's not your home. Mm-hmm. You've also decided to do that and go to a place where you are not the man. Mm-hmm. And you're also getting incredible resources and knowledge every single day. How can you be stopped? How can this not become a reality for you?
That's right.
And so that's where, for us, we wanted that culture where it was like, hey, so I played for the Yankees, right, in their minor league system. And I remember George saying this. He was the owner, right, of the team at the time.
Yes.
You all as players are going to have everything that, and I remember like everybody would talk about the Yankee way, and I remember seeing the reality of that when I went to the Yankees versus having been with 2 other organizations. Mm-hmm. Every affiliate had their own masseuse, could go in there every day if you wanted to, and I remember thinking like how unique and forward thinking this is compared to the other 2 organizations that I had been with.
Right.
But I remember it being said when you were there, hey, players, you're going to have everything you need, just win.
That's it. Get the job done.
You don't have an excuse.
That's right.
And so for us, that's kind of how our mentality is, and our culture and our setting is, you don't have an excuse to not live out your dream.
Man, that's awesome. That's so great. Gosh. Well, it is. It's an unbelievable facility. It's just, it's like a toy store for me, right? So, and for you too, I guess.
No doubt.
You have the greatest job in the world because you're still in the game. Even if you had played your entire career, I think you'd probably be done by now, right? So
that's right.
But now you're a couple decades in, carving your own path in the game that you dreamed of being in the big leagues, and you are.
That's right.
You are.
And that's the idea that where one door closes, another one opens. Mm-hmm. I thought playing was my future, and if I look back, I was only being trained to do what I do now.
Right, that's right.
All the experiences, all the things, and so we talk about our kids. Mm-hmm. I had a friend tell me this. His son now plays at Arkansas, and he said, Hunter, my son told me he wanted to be a professional baseball player, so I sought you out. If he had told me he wanted to be an astronaut, I'd gone to NASA.
Right.
We want to give our children, right? Our job as a parent is to help them fulfill their dreams, in my opinion. It's part of our job as a parent. It's to teach them to be a great human. It's to teach all these things. But, my son tells me, one of my sons, I have 4 children, and they're all unique, and they're all so cool and all the things that they are. But I have one son who you've coached, and I had a big impact on his life. I've told you that. He tells me he wants to be the greatest baseball player that ever lived.
That's right.
And I tell him I believe you.
Yep.
But big goals require big sacrifices. And if that's what you want to do, you're more than capable.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had a conversation with a parent the other day. You know, unfortunately, in our business of youth sports, parents become the problem most of the time.
Yes.
And I had a conversation with another parent that ended up leaving our group and going to play for another team because at the end of the day, you know, they felt like we weren't good enough for them in essence.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them in that conversation, because they also, you know, said to me, you know, I hope someday you'll teach your son that it's okay to leave others behind if they're holding them back.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking in that moment when I heard that, saying, I bet you Michael Jordan never thought that way.
Ooh.
I bet you Tom Brady never thought that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had the dog in them.
That's right.
They had to learn how to fight from behind. The greatest players that ever lived, I said, so when my son tells me that's what he wants to be, I've got to teach him how to be the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Because the greatest players that ever lived were underdogs.
There you go.
Because no one was born the greatest player that ever lived. They worked themselves to that place.
That's right. They took their God-given abilities and sharpened and fine-tuned those and made them the weapons that they are. Right.
100%. And so that's where I think we're missing, you know, I go back to the idea of like life is fair. Everybody's price is just different. That's where we're missing the point sometimes.
Yes.
Is that like I'm okay finishing second if it was done the way it was supposed to be done.
That's right.
You know, and it was given the way it was supposed to be given.
Mm-hmm.
But when we try to skip steps and we think there's a cheat code, there's no cheat code to the end. There's no cheat code to success. At the end of the day, you got to wake up every day with a dream, and you got to wake up and pull your bootstraps up and go to work.
I used to say the shortcut is actually the long way. I used to say that a lot, and my friend Brad, who's really smart, he was like, well, what do you mean? Like, the shortcut could be the short way if it's the best way. I was like, all right, well, let me rephrase then, right? So the shortcut it's phrased wrong. The fastest way to get somewhere is just the best way to get there. And sometimes that would be the shortcut, I guess, would be the best way without mistakes along the way and all that kind of stuff. So,
but you know, so much of it is like, I think it's easy for us sometimes to look at it and say, man, I just wished it would have been easier.
Absolutely.
Like, right? Like, I think that, and it's like, versus like taking a step back and saying, don't we just enjoy like, what is this really about?
Yeah.
Like, shouldn't it be about the ride? Shouldn't it be about a process-driven life? Like, because isn't that how we mature as people into who we currently are and want to be? And that's where that's why I go back. I love youth sports. Like, I love baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Because so much of baseball is like life. You don't hit 1,000.
No, nobody's undefeated in anything, really.
In anything. And so at the end of the day, it's like baseball, you hit 300, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like, it just teaches so much about dealing with failure, learning with failure. Like, you know, and you and I remember this as players. Like, you know, if at the end of the day, there's always going to be somebody better at something.
Right.
Whether that be today, what you hope for is that very early in your life you learn that.
That's right.
Because what happens sometimes with people is they never hit that point. And then when you hit that point and it's at the peak or at the top, that's when it gets tough. You know, and I think you see that a lot in my business. I see that a lot in professional baseball, is the first time somebody really struggled was when they get to the big leagues, when they're really talented. And that's a hard place to recover from mentality-wise.
Well, it's so much reference-based. Hard is a reference. Heavy is a reference. What's heavy to me, but like that was a big thing when we were playing. They said baseball players don't lift heavy. And I can remember a trainer said, Nick, you shouldn't bench press that much. And I looked at her and I was like, but it's not heavy. it's not heavy, right? You said I shouldn't lift heavy. It was a reference thing. And a lot of things in what's hard for you is a reference, and it may not be hard for somebody else. What you're going through is a reference.
100%.
Right? And that's, I don't know, but that's one of the hardest things in life to learn, because a lot of people will use a reference as a crutch to fail.
Right. And most people don't want to do what is required. So they would rather say that than and do the work to get to that place.
Yes.
It's easier to, and it's also, I couldn't accept this. So what motivated me the most to get to where I was in helping players from a development standpoint is my hypothesis, at least the hypothesis, the only one I could live with, is that you were not born better.
Okay.
Because if you were, right, if at the end of the day everybody in the big leagues was just born to be a major leaguer, why are we working?
Correct. Correct.
And I couldn't live with the idea of that. And so in my mind, what I went after and wanted to look at is the best of the best, because in my opinion, the only people to study when you're creating a standard is the best of the best.
Oh man, yes.
And one that is time after time after time. So someone in the Hall of Fame in the 50s and someone in the Hall of Fame in the 80s should have the same characteristics and traits. If my hypothesis is true,
right,
that efficiency trumps ability.
Efficiency trumps ability, yes.
And that was what I was after, because at the end of the day, there's lots of talented people. There's lots of people with ability, but what separates the best from the rest? And that's in all honesty, I believe it's true, because I've studied it long enough to think, and I'm learning every day. I don't know it all, but what I've come to realize is that within the context of principles, so if you take the swing or the delivery, whatever you want to do within sport, if you take the principles of the swing, the best hitters in the world, right, are more on time, cultivate energy more efficiently, and deliver it more consistently. And there are scalability of that. So, for instance, Mike Trout does those things at a higher level than the 30th best center fielder in the game.
Right.
He doesn't do that because he's born with more ability than those guys. He does it because he's more efficient than those guys. Like, there are guys with just as much ability who have never become that level of player.
Absolutely.
And so that was the study of the game through that lens, was can you look at it in that way, and then can you reverse engineer it and teach it?
Okay.
And so when you look at those core foundational principles, then can you, because what is it, knowing and understanding are two different things?
Yes.
If you can't teach it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand.
Right.
Because in order to understand, you have to know it at an exponential level. Like, you have to know all the variables and all the things that go into the equation to arrive at the outcome. Because then you can pull out the minimum effective dose to then teach. And you can then reverse engineer it to regress or progress it based on someone's ability.
Incredible. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that's the idea of development at a high level, in my opinion. That's what everybody is searching for in sport. That's why so much science is being studied around, human performance.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, we can't ever forget, if we're talking about long-term athletic development, or we're talking about human beings developing to their highest level in the context of baseball, we're talking about a human first, an athlete second, and a baseball player third.
That's right.
So, and what that means is, like, for instance, you're a human first.
Yep.
An elbow needs to work like an elbow, right?
Yep.
Or a shoulder needs to work like a shoulder. If a shoulder works like an elbow, it's no longer a shoulder.
Right.
And so you got to be the human being first. Then you layer on top of that the ability to be an athlete, and then you have and arrive at the skill of baseball. And so if you take sport today, where we're missing the point, see, our long-term athletic development model in the United States is trash.
Okay, I agree.
We just have more people playing.
That's right. That's
and more
exactly
resources than most people in the world.
Thank you.
We're actually not doing a very good job from a long-term athletic development.
Dude, it's the same way in business. It's the same way in business. We have more resources than anywhere else in the world, more education, we have more everything.
And there are people doing it much better in other places.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at that, what's happening is why most people's dreams end prematurely in the context of high-level sport is because when you dial it back to when they're 8 to 12 years old, they're not doing the things necessary. They're playing too much. They're forgetting about training. They're not challenging their body in multiple ways. They're not creating a joy and love for the game because all it becomes is about winning the next tournament.
Right.
And so really that's why you see so much of I give myself as a perfect example. Like I was the walk-on that became an All-American.
That's right.
Why? Like how many people were giving scholarships before I was?
Right.
They were supposed to be better.
Right.
They weren't.
Right.
And it's because my parents got a lot of that long-term athletic development model and our community, right? I'll tell people this story all the time. I grew up in a town of 30,000 people.
Okay.
I grew up on a little circle in that little town. And off of that circle were 4 professional athletes.
Wow.
One of the lead guitarists for Carrie Underwood.
Wow.
You know, multiple collegiate athletes that all grew up, and there were 50 homes.
Wow.
On that circle.
Yeah.
Why?
Iron
because
sharpened iron.
And our families got it right as
That's
to what
right.
this long-term athletic model. They weren't saying you're going to be a professional baseball player when you were little.
Yeah.
They were saying go outside, play, compete, put yourself around like-minded people
Yes.
in an environment that challenges you all.
Yes.
And then you kind of shape your path into whatever you're gifted at. Your son plays baseball with my son. He's a very good pitcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he loves to play baseball. But he's as good or equally as good or maybe better in music.
Yeah.
Right? But you played professional baseball and you're not telling your son you have to do that.
That's correct.
You're encouraging him to do what makes him happy.
That's right.
You know? And that's like people probably look at me sometimes and they say, well, you just want your son to be a professional baseball player. No, if my son tells me he wants to be an artist, I'm going to figure out how to get him to be Picasso.
Well, if
that's what he wants.
Both of your youngest sons are opposites.
They are 100%.
Right. But they're alike in the way that they are, that what they want to be and who they are, they're all in on it.
That's right.
They're all in. Right. Your youngest, Jax, and my son, Ethan, are old souls from the same tribe, man.
They are.
Absolutely, they are.
They are. And maybe sometimes as competitors on a baseball field, that drives us nuts at times because they sometimes would rather be their minds somewhere else.
Absolutely.
But when you see inside of them the joy of life that they have, I wish I was more like that.
I do too. I learn a ton from my son and other kids like that. I'm like you. Once my mind gets somewhere, leave me alone until I get to the end. I can't. I'm in. I don't even want to talk. Don't even talk to me. Just let me finish this thought. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's good and it's bad at the same time.
Right. And that's why we're all uniquely made, and ultimately we can appreciate each other. Mm-hmm. You know, for those things.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about. I want to talk a little bit more about the business of baseball, and we mentioned long-term athletic development. So there's long-term development that's needed in anything, right? So I'm so fascinated with your business and your industry, and we were talking before we started shooting that I could have exactly what you have if I'm willing to put in how many years you been doing this now? 18?
18.
If I'm willing to do what you did with 18, might even take me less because you might help me out and say, this is where I bumped my head, don't do that.
That's right.
Right? But either way, 12, 14, 15 years is what it's going to take. And if I'm willing to do it, I can have it. Right?
That's right.
And even then, I might be competing with you, and you're 18 years ahead of me. Right, which means my price is going to be a little bit different.
Your price is going to be different. You know, and at the end of the day, I've told people this that want to be in our industry or say, hey, could I create a company like yours? Or do you ever worry about a company competing with you in this space or doing the things that you do? And I'm always like, no.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I welcome that.
Sure.
Because if someone's pushing me on that end, it makes me have to think harder and longer and find different answers, because I never forget why I do it. It isn't about me, it's about the players.
That's right.
I'm in this business to help the next player or the one that's right there in front of me at the time. You know, I gave a talk not long ago at a Pitchapalooza. I was talking to some of the coaches. And I was like, you know, where we forget as teachers of this game, because all we are is mentors.
Right.
Call it whatever you want. Like, we're mentors to young men.
That's it.
And we can't forget that person arrived in front of us with the same energy, enthusiasm, that we once had, and we need to be able to have the answer when he asks the question. Or we need to be humble enough to tell him we don't know, but we're going to be hungry enough to go find it for him. Because the loneliest place in the world for a player to be is standing in front of a coach with a desire to be excellent and that person not have the answers for him.
You just described 95% of salesmen. The exact same thing.
And that's why business and baseball and all these things, it's all intertwined and interrelated. It's just different industries.
My dad always said baseball was the greatest life teacher there is, because of the greatest in the game, they still fail more than they succeed, over half.
Right.
Over
That's right.
half.
And business, it might be more than baseball.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you look at the greatest businesses anywhere, and you could look at what they did immediately after they failed, and that's usually where they're the greatest in, right? So Steve Jobs used to say that if you waited till it was perfect to release it, you waited too long. Think about where would the iPhone be if they didn't come out, if a competitor didn't show up?
That's right.
And push them, you know?
And that's why I think it's so interesting when the mentality creeps in that you'd rather somebody not be able to do something, or you don't want to play the best. You know, we've talked about this, you and I coaching together. It's like we want to get our tails kicked.
Absolutely.
We want to know where we have to strive to be. How do we know how to get there? It's like somebody told me once, don't ever be the strongest person in the room.
Thank you.
There's no growth there.
Don't ever be the smartest person in the room either.
And everybody dies inside their comfort zone.
Say that again.
Every single person in the world dies inside of their comfort zone. If you are not stretching yourself, you're going backwards. We don't stay the same. As an organism, that's why chaos exists in the world, right? Like, it's to create the ability to say, I'm not going to stay here, I'm going to reach further. And I think for us, like as coaches, as parents, as business owners, it is our duty to consistently preach that message.
Yes.
And to spend time in that way with people, because when we lose the idea that it's about where in the world did it become a thing where we can't disagree and still be friends?
I don't know. That's how I learn.
Like that's why we compete on the field, right?
Yes.
We want to strive, we want to be pushed, we're going to get our tails kicked sometimes, and we shake our hands. Like, that's the other thing I hope never, like, so many things if we look at it the right way, COVID might have brought into the world that is a good thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? But one of them I hope that never goes away is that after a game we either get in a circle with each other and we pray, or we go and we shake hands, whatever that looks like, because that interaction and saying, you know what, you just kicked my tail and I'm still going to go shake your hand and thank you for doing it.
That's right.
Because you just helped me be better.
Yeah, a lot of times good sportsmanship is mistaken for, like, some parents will
weakness.
Weakness. They're going to shoot me in the face for saying that. Like, it's sportsmanship is not weakness at all. It's actually a signal of strength, because when you do get beat, you take it like you take it, and you know what you got. Now you know what the mark is to grow, and then more importantly, when you do win, it's okay to be proud.
That's right.
It's okay to be proud. That's why they have the trophy presentations and the standing up and talking and thanking people and award shows and everything. It's okay to be proud and celebrate
Like weakness, humility isn't a weakness.
That's right.
It's a strength.
That's right.
Because it says you're okay with yourself.
That's right. That's
and that's the false and pretense of it is where people they mistake that.
That's right.
The ability to, are there things that come from that maybe we don't all like or we wish would be a little different? Sure. But the ability to be okay, like no one should ever be okay with losing.
Right.
But it's okay to lose.
That's right.
What
is it you say? You say what happened. What happened is it's not okay. What happened, right?
Yeah. But it's going to be okay.
But it's going to be okay.
Right. That is. It's not okay, but it will be okay.
That's right.
And that's where I think from a competitive standpoint is winning isn't everything, but it's also not nothing.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you're just striving. That's what I said. I think I said this when I was talking about my baseball career. It was never about it was never about the end.
Right.
Like it's never about the end. It's about who you become on your way there.
That's what Kobe referenced that a lot about. He enjoyed the work.
It's because that's what we're like. It was never for me about being a major leaguer. It was just, can I consistently face people that are better than I am, and that's going to get me to strive to my best place.
Absolutely.
And then on the other side of it, I got to be okay if it doesn't happen, because I can't be wrapped up that that's my identity.
That's right.
That's where most people fail. Like most people, the saddest people in the world, they get everything they want, and it wasn't enough.
That's right.
Because they didn't realize that it was never about getting that thing.
That's right. That's right. So how does the business, because baseball is a business,
100%.
Big one, and they're not playing because of it.
It's $10 billion industry.
$10 billion. So what starts off as a love in a game, like the reason that I didn't play further is I didn't understand, I didn't evolve into any sort of a businessman. I was just so happy to just play. And as a businessman today, I could have played further with the same talent and the same skill set had I understood that, right? So at some point in time, now you can, it's both. I love the business I'm in today. This is business, what we're doing right here, and I love it, right? So the business of baseball and the mindset, because there's a paradigm shift that has to, some form of a paradigm shift that does have to happen when you go from playing for free for the love of the game to all of a sudden that's how you make a living. Right? So talk to me about kind of, because that's really what you guys, one of the things that you specialize in.
That's right.
Is working with those players. So not only are you developing them physically, but you're developing them from a business perspective.
Well, I think what you have to realize in the professional landscape is you are a commodity.
Yes.
Right? Like professional owners, and this is part of why they're at odds. Professional owners are buying and selling players just like you'd buy and sell stocks. At the end of the day, it's just, does it make your business more profitable or does it not?
Yes, those clubs are owned by somebody and they're there for a profit.
That's right. And so at the end of the day, as a player, you have to understand that. What allows you to be profitable for a business? Now, you could look there, you could say, hey, I'm going to never wear a collared shirt when they ask me to. I'm going to not do community service when it's something I could be doing. And you might be talented enough to overcome those things. But what if you're not?
Right.
Wouldn't it have made more sense to understand how to conduct yourself, how to walk in and own the room, how to make sure, one of the biggest things we talk about from a training perspective is when you show up for your first spring training, it's the most important spring training that you'll ever show up for. And here's the reason why. Because when you left for the season, they had a report on you. Okay. This is the kind of player you are. This is what your skills are. This is where we think they're trending. And this is what we think this player is going to become. Right? Those are all the things that are going in their conversations. And so what we always talk to players about is, okay, they left you. When you left, they gave you a report and said, when you come back to spring training, we want you to be boom, boom, boom. What if you don't hit those marks?
Okay.
How are you going to be perceived by that organization when you walk back in? So let's say you come in, you're 10 pounds overweight. What are they going to say? You're lazy.
Right.
What if you come in and you outworked any of their thoughts? What are they going to say? They're going to have changed your grade. They're going to have put a new ceiling on you. And then what does that create for you? It creates opportunities. At the end of the day, leverage,
yes,
right, is what you're after in anything. Whether that be business, baseball, or anything else. And leverage comes down to, are your skills irreplaceable or are they not?
Right.
So when you look at now how players are judged in the game, it's on a calculation that creates your WAR number. WAR stands for wins above replacement.
Yep.
So if you're replaceable, and that's what we talk about, if another person could just walk into your role and do the exact same thing as you do, you are replaceable. You have zero value and zero leverage.
I looked up the definition of leverage. I asked my good old pal Webster. The definition of leverage as a noun, the exertion of force by means of a lever or an object used in a manner of a lever, right? The ratio, in finance, it's the ratio of a company's loan capital debt to the value of its common stock equity. Leverage. Leverage is a word that gets misused all the time, right? So, and it comes from the base of the word lever, right? So I love looking up words for their meanings and stuff like that because words matter. Mm-hmm. And people misuse them all the time. So tell them again what leverage means in the business of baseball.
In the business of baseball is how replaceable are you?
How replaceable are you?
So at the end of the day, where analytics has gotten a part of the game is they look at the start of every year and say, how many wins is it going to take to get to the playoffs?
That's right. So,
and then they're going to calculate their team based on that and say, what do we need in order to get above this number, behind this number, whatever that might be, and then that's how they're going to decide the dollars that they spend on particular players. So what's happening in the game right now, and where most people probably aren't watching from a close enough standpoint to see it, is there are teams who aren't even trying to win. See, the business of baseball isn't like the business of banks. Well, maybe in this country it is, but it's in baseball, you don't lose your team if you're not good.
Right. You can still sell merch and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, gosh, the Cubs, one of the biggest draws and most successful franchises in sports history, and they didn't win for a long time.
For a long time. And so it's different than like in the standpoint of some industries, right?
Yes.
But from a playing standpoint, it's zero different. Like if you aren't going to be above a winning baseball player, and so I've talked to play. It's actually played really well into our model as a company,
right?
Because we voice so much that it's about being a good player, and the business flows from being a good player versus me as an agent saying I'm just going to negotiate whatever for you, no matter what kind of player you are, because I want to tell you I'm the best negotiator in the world, or whatever the standpoint is of that particular sell point of a company. Where this has played into us is you're not hiding from the numbers anymore as a player. Why do you think StatCast is in stadiums? It wasn't to be cool for fans. It was to evaluate players.
That's right.
What if your sprint speed is going down over a 3-year period? You're no longer valuable anymore. And so it's ways to collect data on players, right, so that now are they replaceable or are they not? And so that's where from our end it's so important to educate players about what is required to be a good business investment. You know, you can't ever lose your innocence. Mm-hmm. You can't ever forget that you played this game because you love playing this game. You can't lose that.
Right.
You just have to be aware of what the business of the game is.
You know, that's so true in any business. So we talk a lot around here about, like, you want to make more money, right? So when you go to your boss to ask for a raise, you need to go in with some leverage, right? We just define leverage of being, are you replaceable or not, right? So before you go ask for more money, you might want to ask yourself, can I be replaced? As a matter of fact, that's why most people do get let go late in their careers, is because there's somebody else that can replace them and do it cheaper.
That's right.
For the same job.
That's right.
Right? So I've never heard leverage defined that way, but I'm going to use it from now on. That's perfect. It's short, sweet.
Well, and if we think about that in any walk of life.
That's right.
So people stress about money. Mm-hmm. Do they have an irreplaceable skill?
Everybody does, right? But
if they look at it through that lens.
That's right.
If you can learn to sharpen what you are, if you can understand what your uniqueness to the world is,
yes,
and you can sharpen that beyond other people within that way, you're always valuable. And what I mean by that is you're valuable to the world. If people can just see it in the context of everybody has this uniqueness and everybody has these gifts, you're valuable to the world. The problem is sometimes as people get lost, they get too caught up in looking right and left and comparing themselves to other people, like, well, that person's ahead of me, or that person has more money, or that person's gotten the job that I wanted, or that person has the car I wish I could drive, versus like peeling that back and saying, this is a process-oriented life. Like, they didn't get that because it was handed to them most of the time.
Right.
I'm sure there are situations like that. But
Absolutely.
But if you took the 10 richest people in the world and you took all their money, they'd have it back in a couple of years.
So Grant Cardone did that on a show called Undercover Billionaire. They gave him $100, a cell phone with no contacts, and they dropped him off, and a used car, and they dropped him and two other amazing people, dropped him off in a town where nobody knew who they were. They were undercover, shaved their heads, totally that. And they had 90 days to create $1 million business. They had $100, and they didn't have a place to stay that night. They can't go spend $100 on a motel room because tomorrow they're in the exact same spot, right? It's incredible. It was the second season they did it. Grant actually created a $5.5 million marketing company in 90 days in Pueblo, Colorado, of all places.
Which is amazing, and that's the idea of leverage.
That's right.
The average, that person isn't replaceable. Now, he might be replaceable in a certain industry or certain thing. Like, everybody's not good at everything.
Right.
Right? So he'd probably be replaced if he was a professional baseball player. He doesn't have the skills to play. But in this other walk, so it's like finding what you're good at and being great at it. You know, and that's Derek Johnson's thing, who is a former pitching coach at Vanderbilt and have gotten to know over the years. And he always says, everybody's trying to do everything. Why don't you just be great at what you're good at?
Oh, wow.
And that's pretty simple, isn't it?
It is.
But what we do, right, is we get distracted and we get pulled in lots of directions versus like starting to just narrow in on, for me, that's, I'm sure I could have done a lot of things. I love the game, and I realized that I had a unique mind to see it in a different way.
Absolutely.
And could look at it through a different lens and was willing to take the risk to do that.
I know my son loves the game more because of his time with you. Straight up. And it's because of your way to the portrait that you can paint about the game and express that to them. And he sees it totally differently now because of your point of view and your perspective.
And that's cool. Because we all played because we just love the game. You said something earlier that stuck with me, and I wanted to further it, and words are important. Context of words are extremely important. So I'm going to ask a question. I think it's a really cool exercise.
Cool.
And it speaks to like development in the game of baseball. Like, you've experienced this as a player. It's really fuzzy. Everybody's got their opinions and theories on how to hit a ball and what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
And because there's so many theories, it makes it confusing.
Yes.
And it's already hard enough. And if it's really hard to do and it's very confusing, it can make you very frustrated.
Yes.
Right? So let's run through this exercise, and I'll explain where I'm going with this.
Cool.
All right. I'm going to say a word.
Yep.
And you looked it up on Webster.
Yep.
All right. But I want you to tell me the meaning of a word that I'm about to say, okay?
Okay, cool.
All right. Steal.
Steal, to take something from somebody else.
I was just talking about not moving.
Gotcha. That's right.
Context.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I was talking about a piece of metal.
Okay.
Context.
Yes.
So words are important when you understand the context behind them. And so in the game of baseball, like, how you interpret what I'm saying could be completely different than what I was after when I was saying it.
Yes.
So I need to be able to understand that how I use words and how I communicate with someone is how they will understand, comprehend, and learn. And if it's fuzzy in any way, and there's not a common language, I talked about this at one of my I talked at Palooza a number of years ago, and I said this. I said, what happens at a doctor's office or an ER? Mm-hmm. Why do they put the chart on the end of your bed? Mm-hmm. It's so the nurse, because they're transitioning out people or doctors all the time, they don't come in and kill you.
That's right.
Because they don't put the wrong medicine into your IV that you're allergic to, whatever, right?
Yeah, there's how many Hollywood movies have made fun of that, where they they do the wrong procedure on somebody or
exactly
like that.
So that's happening every day in baseball, and we don't even give it any thought.
We were talking about the word mindset one day at a team function. There was dozens and dozens of people there, and I stopped halfway through because it dawned on me that, let's say there was 45 people there. There was 40. We were talking about 45 different things and labeled it one word, because we didn't all agree on what the word meant that we were talking about, the context.
100%. And that's what's going. So when you think about the game of baseball, that's been my thing in the development space for a long time now, is trying to create a more common language centered around the same thing. Because I think we're gonna. How do we get there if we don't know where we're going?
That's right.
Right. If you don't actually know what you're after, you're rarely going to hit the mark.
That's right.
And so, I just think it's really important. Like, it's been a quest of mine. I value it a lot. I try to talk a lot about it. That because I give you a great example. I do this every time I talk in a group setting. Have you heard the phrase "be on time"?
Yes.
Like in baseball.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. As hitters, we've all heard this phrase.
Yes.
What does it mean?
It means at the end of the day that you're in sync with the opposing pitcher, right?
Right. At its core.
Yes.
Both physically, right, mentally, right, all of the above.
But when you hear it, they're just talking about the impact of bat to ball, right?
That's exactly right. And what all goes into that?
Well, you have to be on time with a lot of other things before impact, right? So you got to be on when the process starts, you got to be on time.
That's exactly right. So it's a series of questions,
yes.
right? Why can no one fully explain being on time? Because how do you measure it?
That's right.
But let me ask you another question.
Okay.
Some of the most important things in life, can you measure them? Happiness? Love?
It's all reference, right?
It's all reference.
That's right.
And so being on time becomes an idea of a series of questions, but in order to arrive at what it is or to fully explain it, you have to have made it important. We've all heard that phrase thousands of times.
Yes.
Yet people don't give it its right priority.
That's right.
And its right importance in the swing equation. And so I think that mimics also life, right? We don't give the right priority.
Yes.
To the things that actually matter.
Right. Oh man, and there's like you always say, the little things are the big things, right? That gets one too. The little things are the big things. And all that means is like, so when you're talking about being on time with impact of baseball or closing the deal by giving the customer a good experience. Well, when did the experience start? There's all these little things.
There you go.
Right? There's all these things that added up to that. So for the hitter, there's all these sequences of things that they had to be on time with every single time and in rhythm, so that when impact happened, you were on time at that point.
That's exactly right. And it's an extremely complex task, but it shouldn't be so complicated.
That's right.
But we make it complicated because there's no common language. It's really fuzzy. No one is giving the proper things the proper priority, and so we make a really complicated, hard thing even more complicated,
So we talk a lot. You and I talk a lot about. We reference the greats of sports, and we mentioned Michael Jordan earlier. And Michael Jordan. So with with the world we live in today, I understand why a lot of big leaguers may not play when some of them play hurt, some of them don't. I understand both, right? I understand playing hurt, there's a certain level of toughness. Showing up, playing every day when your team's counting on you, it matters. Michael Jordan's flu game, for instance, right? When you're faced with that adversity, you do amazing things, right? At the same time, I understand if you're getting paid $30 million to perform a certain way, you don't want to go out there and put yourself in a place where you might unhinge that to a certain degree. But right now, like, life happens. right? Always. In the office today, we've been having HVAC problems, right? But the show must go on. Players, part of playing the season means you play the season. You got to be there. Your team's expecting on you, and they're counting on you. Your company is counting on you, right? So where have we gone off the rails, in your opinion, as to, like, there's a difference between hurt and injured?
No question. And I think, unfortunately, it's from the top down. A lot of times players are unfairly criticized for things that are out of their control.
Okay.
Most of the time they're not playing because management won't let them.
Okay.
Because they are investing $30 million into them.
Right.
The player doesn't always have the say. We talk about that a lot, like the understanding of, like, if you go in the training room and you make that trainer aware that you have something going on, just know that you're probably out for 7 days. So you have to know the difference between injured and hurt. And it's the bumps and the bruises. I think. So we're both parents.
Yep.
And we want to protect our kids.
Yep.
Right? The worst thing in the world for a parent is the unknown.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It's hard. We have to let them fall.
Mm-hmm.
We have to let them get those bruises. Because what are we doing? We're teaching them the difference in what is hurt and injured.
That's right.
Right? And then sometimes, like, I've probably done this, you've probably done this, we've told our kid to get back up, and we probably shouldn't have. We probably should have hugged them.
That's right.
But I hope what we're trying to instill within the mindset of that is we're capable of a lot more than we think we are.
Yes.
And we can push through a lot more than we think we can.
I have a daughter that's 11 months old, right? She's about to be, right at 11 months old, and or about to be. And I can remember when Ethan was an incredibly tough kid, because when he'd fall, it was like, hey, it's okay. It was great. We laughed when he fell, instead of, are you okay? Because they were looking at you for the emotion to give. They're looking at you for that emotion. And with my daughter, I catch myself doing it when Ethan fell. It was like, just get up, you're fine, buddy. And when she falls, it's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? She cries a lot more over the same things than Ethan did, and it's all because of how we reference her reference point. You know what I'm saying?
Well, because at the end of the day, like, as a dad, like, I have a daughter too, and there's nothing that's more joyous in the world than your little girl. Like, and we want them to be a princess, and we hold them to a different versus the boy sometimes. And what we got to realize is they're way tougher than us as boys anyway.
That's right.
They have to give birth to all of us, so they're in and of itself, they're tougher than we are.
Absolutely, they are. Holy cow, they are. We say it a lot all the time when we're bringing on new agents. Business owners will. How well they do is really just what they can. It's really their threshold for what they can take and what they can withstand and how far they can push. The toughest on the planet is the single mom, because they will not fail. They will not fail.
Well, and speaking of reference point, I've had this conversation a few times with players, like there's a phrase out there, like, I'm just grinding, just enjoying the grind. And I think that's a really kind of interesting narrative to get off on, because I've asked a player a few times, how is playing baseball a grind? I know a single mom with 3 jobs,
right? That
probably at times feels like a grind.
That's right.
Now, with perspective, what is that teaching you? That's teaching you what you're actually capable of.
That's right.
So I talk to my kids a lot about that. It's like if we ever start to treat this youth sport as a grind, because you hear that a lot in this, like, culture of social media and some of that stuff, and I love social media, but I think that's that narrative. But it's all about reference. You've said that a couple times, and to some people, their particular plight is their reference point. It is hard at times for them, or whatever it might be.
That's right. So first of all, I mean, honestly, dude, we've been rocking and rolling for 90 minutes. Can you believe that?
No, because it just feels like what our conversations are always like when we hang out.
I know, Fiona. We have to start recording all these when Hunter and I hang out, because they're fantastic. But and I say this a lot. We're gonna start bringing some folks back, dude. I got to bring you back. Honestly, I could do a whole series with you just on this stuff, and I'd like to do that at some point sooner than later. But let's you and your brother run an amazing business. It's incredible what you guys have accomplished in 18 years, from all the way down to just owning real estate in Brentwood.
That's right.
Which is an incredible feat. The facility is absolutely top notch. You're in an industry you're in an ocean with the biggest fish on the planet, and you guys have gotten in there and you found your niche, and you're thriving. You're growing like crazy, better now than you ever have been. Every year is better than the one before. You guys you coach both your kids' teams. You're raising. Your wife is an incredible entrepreneur in her own right, and you have 2 teenagers. One's already out the house, I guess, right?
He's in his last year of high school at a private school, and then my daughter is a sophomore in high school.
It's awesome. So you guys, and you spend time at home. You spend time with all your kids and your family. You guys you're just doing it right. You're doing it right, but you're in control of your time. But I also know that nobody works more than you do.
It feels like my wife would probably say, I don't know if I'm in control of my time. No, but I think what makes it work is that we all have similar priorities in life, and that's to live life to our fullest.
Well, what you guys are doing in the Little League sector in Nashville is incredible. You guys have totally revived one of the best locations and best Little Leagues in Tennessee.
Yeah, it's such a cool thing. So McCabe Little League is where we live, kind of in the Sylvan Park area over the hill from Vanderbilt, and a group of us had our kids in the league, have had our kids in the league for a number of years. That's where my little ones learned to play baseball, so it has a special place in my heart. But when I watched the first couple of years there, I'm just, if I'm going to be in, I'm in. Mm-hmm. Like, there isn't a halfway in. If I'm in, it's all the way.
Commitment, man.
Commitment. And so when I decided to invest, my biggest priority was, it's important to create fun. Mm-hmm. Right? 100%. We need to associate the game of baseball as fun. But we also know, as baseball players, if you strike out every at bat, it's not fun.
That's right.
So there has to be a certain level of competency within the skill that you're acquiring and what you're doing. And so we just put a lot of initiatives in place from coach training to, because most of the people that are involved in youth sports are just parents that love their children.
That's right.
And not every parent played at a high level, or, especially as we grow and grow and grow. And here in particular in this city, we're growing all the time. And
yeah.
So we just put in a lot of initiatives, and it's through the hard work of a lot of people. But, we had never had more than a couple of hundred kids in our league ever in the history of our league.
Yeah.
This spring, there's 625 kids playing baseball in our league.
Incredible.
We have an all-girls team.
Incredible.
For the first time in our league.
Incredible.
It's just a neat place. And I think it's really cool. I spoke about one of my good friends, Matt Cada. So Matt worked for the Cleveland Indians. He's out of professional baseball now, but he worked for after he got done playing, he ended up working for the Cleveland Indians for a number of years. And his role with them was youth outreach. Mm-hmm. And so he and I, every Monday morning at 5 a.m., would have a call. Like, that was our way of not losing touch with each other. As our lives are busy, he's an important person in my life. We made it a priority to get up first thing of the week, and we'd have a conversation, and we would talk about any number of things that were going on in our life, but then it would always come back to, we wanted to talk about development of the game, mm-hmm. And just sparking ideas with each other. And so he's a good thinker. He just has a unique mind, and he was looking for ways to improve the camps, because the biggest thing he was doing in youth outreach was training coaches and doing camps around the city of Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Right? Grassroots stuff.
That's right.
In the game. And so he was looking at creative ways to teach the game, and he came across this program, and it was created by Sport Canada called Rally Caps.
Oh, I love that.
And so the idea behind the program was that physical literacy trumped skill. So you needed to teach my example to that is, how are you going to play the outfield if you don't know how to backpedal?
Right.
Or flip your hips and run, right? So there's fundamental skills of athleticism that you have to learn to play the game of baseball. And so their whole idea was smaller numbers, smaller groups, and so out of that, so Matt started to take ideas from that and develop in his camps in Cleveland. And he and I were talking about this every week. And I was like, you know what, Matt, I'm going to bring that. Nobody else is doing it. Nobody's done it in the Little League. I'm going to take this program and I'm going to implement it in our Little League. And that's how our league grew. Like,
wow.
One of the reasons, there's multiple reasons. But, if I showed you the number of young kids that are playing in our league from 4 to 6, because now I didn't even put Kai and Jax in T-ball.
Right.
Because I couldn't watch it.
Right.
Like, 12 kids lined up all hitting in a row and most people aren't paying attention. I was like, my mind and my personality, I was like, no way.
That's right.
I can't sit on it, nor could I coach that. And I say this to my wife all the time. I watch sports and I see teams where there's this need in the inner city, because we're trying to do a lot in the inner city as well of Nashville. Mm-hmm. But the coaches that can love on kids and they can coach them even when there's no chance of winning, that's a special person. Because at the end of the day, who affects our society more than any other role? It's teachers and coaches, and they're paid the least.
That's right.
And that's unfortunate.
Yes.
But in this program, what we've seen is our league has gotten so much better because the young kids, they're associating the game with fun. So, for instance, how that works is, instead of 12-on-12, they're playing 6-on-6, and the other 6 from each team are in the outfield doing stations.
That's awesome.
And so they're getting – because my thought was, if you're going to get good at baseball, you got to practice it a little more. So now, instead of once a week having practice, now they're getting that secondary practice within the game. It's keeping them active. No station is more than 5 to 7 minutes, and then they're moving on to the next.
That's right.
A part of the station every week is that they do hurdle hops or backpedal or run through a cone. Every third week they play a game like dodgeball or kickball. So now the parents and the kids are like, man, this is the greatest thing ever. We come to the ballpark and we just have fun. And so they're associating that on the baseball field. But more importantly, what they're learning is physical literacy. And I could show you all kinds of stats in how you raise your income levels. You do better in school when you have control of your body and you're physically literate. And so all these just great things that are coming about, and it's just such a neat thing to watch happen in our little subset of Nashville and our little league community.
A process-driven life.
A process-driven life.
That should be the name of your first book.
Maybe somebody's already written one like that.
Maybe. Maybe. You could also say a purpose-driven life, because you talk about that a lot. On purpose with a purpose.
On
right?
purpose with a purpose. Yes, sir.
Well, what is there anything else, man, that you'd like to honestly, dude, I learned as much coaching an 11-year-old baseball team with you last year. Honestly, every day I got to go, I was excited, not just for multiple reasons. One was to play the game, be with my kid. The other one is seriously, I learned every day. I recognized immediately that there was an opportunity for me in service, right? And you never know where those opportunities are going to be. Right, so you never judge a book or a circumstance by the cover, right? That's
right. Well, because when you meet me for the first time, you're probably like, I'm not sure I'm going to hang out with that guy. I'm glad you decided to say yes.
Well, I remember. So when the first year, one of your very first clients was a teammate of mine in Wes Wilkerson.
That's right.
And I remember when he had made it to AAA, and he was one of y'all's first clients, and he came to play against the Sounds here. And you were there, and I remember talking to the late great Farrell Owens. Mm-hmm. Him and Dad were there, and they were like, "That's Wes's agent, Hunter." And it was I think the year before I was playing my senior year at Trevecca, and Farrell's like, "You need to know that guy. He just started an agency." And I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, they got a long road ahead of them, but what I know about Hunter is that they'll figure it out. Farrell said that 18 years ago.
And that's cool to hear. I never knew that story. Thank you for sharing that.
So he just said they'll figure it out. And that was it. And I was like, interesting. And I remember because you had the flow going back then.
Yeah, now I have no hair, so life has changed. Maybe it's all those clients.
That's right. Maybe it's all those clients. But he was right, wasn't he?
100%. At the end of the day, like, life is fair.
That's right. And you guys are, the industry's even bigger now than it was back then, but there was some giants in the industry back then. It's
amazing to have watched it change. And what I have learned over the years is no different than what we've talked about. What is replaceable?
Yeah.
We've developed skills that are unique.
Yep.
And those unique skills are hard to replace.
That's right.
And so what that's allowed for us in this business is to have a niche, is to have a place. And we learn, we expand, we challenge, but we never forget, be great at what you're good at.
That's right. That's right. Be great at what you're good at. So you and your brother own the Bledsoe Agency. The folks can check you guys out on your website, which is the bledsoeagency.com. You guys have some outstanding stuff out on social. You guys actually just released a video. Who made that video for you, by the way?
The MLB PA came in because some of our clients that are on 40-man rosters and got a chance to spend the day with them. And what was so neat about that video is it really didn't focus on us at all.
Correct.
But it told our story.
It did. It sure did.
And that, I think, is the genesis of what culture is.
Well, it's an outstanding video. It's almost like taking a tour of the facility to a certain degree, but it was I know it was really neat. It's a great video, it's like 4 minutes long. It's
actually even it might even be closer to like 6 or 7 minutes.
It's up there.
It is, and it's just it follows a day in the life of 5 of our players. I think is in the video, and or it highlights several of those guys, even though we have a lot more clients than that. It got a chance to highlight a day in the life of some of those guys, and then within it showed some of our other clients as well in the video. But it just is a neat look at, I think what it showed when you watch the video is how much the tribe matters.
Yes.
Within our company, the culture of that, how much that matters to our players and how much they take pride in that. And that, that makes my heart happy because, like I said, I know that I was only a small speck in the outcome for them. Like, they do all the work. They make the sacrifice. They showed up. But I know that there were lots of people that did that for me, but I was always missing that one that, like I always say, like, that's not why I didn't make it. Like, the people that say, man, I wish I would have just had X. Well, I could have figured it out. But I always wanted for my life to have that interaction.
Yeah.
That person that I could bounce ideas and thoughts of, that challenged my growth, that challenged my thought, that challenged me to go beyond what I was capable of. And I had that in my dad. And I had that in a few others. I mentioned Paul.
Yep.
I mentioned some of my friends that have done that for me. But I always thought if I could just create something like that, and my brother, has been a huge part of that outcome happening as well. His thoughts and ideas with respect to that have been phenomenal as well. And honestly, at the end of the day, I have to thank him because he's put up with me, and I know that's not always easy either when you have some different thoughts or different ideas on things, and he was willing to believe that this direction could happen even though it was unique or different. And so it's been cool to watch, and I hope we get to do it for a long time into the future. But I think, I go back to whether we do it forever or we don't do it forever. I hope that it is, but we've also created unique skills that were not replaceable in the grand scheme of things.
There it is. And your players, they're to get where they're at. They're not people like how many things they're given to them on a daily basis, right? So they've got literally, that's part of what you guys do is you negotiate all kinds of stuff for endorsements and everything else. Yet in those videos, and I know it was all that was shot live, you can see what they're wearing. They're wearing the jersey you gave them because it means something. And these are the best of the best on the planet, and they got everything given to them, the best of the best. Yet they're in there sweating it out in a Bledsoe Agency or a Silverback Tribe shirt.
Which is cool.
It's too cool.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just so cool. And those guys, like, I owe so much to them, too, because they could have chosen anybody they wanted.
Absolutely.
You know, they have multiple options and they decided to put their faith in us, and I forever owe those guys that, you know.
Well, one of the things we're going to talk about the next time you come is, because you are in the sales game, because you had to sell all those guys why they needed to be there.
That's right. Every time clients rarely come to us without us going to find them.
That's right. And just
like any business.
Same thing with prospects. That's right. Well, brother, this was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me here.
And I gotta give a shout out to I gotta mention your family real quick. I mentioned your wife before, Bree, who is a saint, absolute saint. You got your two oldest in Cole and Hayden, and then Kai and Jax are your two young studs. And they're fantastic. Like Jax and Ethan are just. They're like two peas in a pod, man.
Yeah, and they all are uniquely and wonderfully made, and it's neat to watch them grow. And know, hopefully they'll go change the world. Absolutely.
Well, folks, if you want to check on, keep up with Hunter and everything that's going on all of their social media, it's just simply at the Bledsoe Agency, right? And then you got another cool little thing on Instagram, Hitter's Blueprint, where you're focusing on a lot of the fundamentals and the framework of baseball, of hitting a baseball. There's some good mindset stuff in there, but it's also really great for young kids.
No doubt.
It's a great profile to keep up with. Anything else that you want to leave the folks with today?
Just at the end of the day, like, I hope, when we have conversations like this or we share things to the world, that somebody takes something away from it.
Yes.
And I know just having these conversations makes me better. So absolutely. I appreciate you having me here and spending time talking.
Likewise, they do make you better. And I'm going to bring you back. We're going to talk about seriously. This might be the first series that we do. I've been wanting to do one, and this would be fantastic. Just because of all the life lessons that happen. So once again, big shout out, big thanks to Hunter Bledsoe, co-founder of the Bledsoe Agency, which once again is an elite baseball management firm right here in Brentwood, Tennessee, that manages professional baseball players. Folks, thanks again. Thanks once again for tuning in to another episode of the Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and until next time, God bless.